Hello class, welcome to my week 3 discussion regarding social interactionism. So in my initial post, I cover what is symbolic interactionism. I'm just going to briefly talk about what it is, and I'm going to also kind of go through a little bit of what the discussion prompted. Okay, symbolic interactionism is a framework in sociology that refers to how each individual develops a symbolic meaning through social interaction. Symbolic interactionism is how people correlate their perception or their interpretation of a symbol's definition, which is widely subjective, not based on objectivity. Symbolic interactionism includes a personal undertone when people interpret objects, events, and behaviors. This can also be true for body language, and I know we do not always conclude the proper emotion with other people's body behaviors. Social interactionism can impact juvenile delinquency because the social audience reaction, which is subjective, casts a judgment about the youth, not necessarily regarding the morality, or the legal act, but from the social perspective. Social interactionism can be positive, such as a wedding ring represents commitment, Rolex watch is about wealth status. And also getting a good grade can boost a student's self-image. However, it can be negative, and people, because it is subjective in sociology, people can use symbolic interactionism for prejudiced reasons. For example, symbolic interactionism can give birth to colorism, which refers to a racist belief that concludes a social reaction because of an individual's physical characteristic. Also, symbolic interactionism can be gender discrimination, such as pay inequality for female workers. So as you can see, just as we demonstrated how social interactionism can be positive for a wedding ring and a watch and wealth, it can also be negative, and it often is unfair to those that are being perceived. All right, so this discussion required us to find an article regarding social interactionism. I would like to just briefly read through it real quick. This is going to talk about both the colorism, but also the positive change of social interactionism in America's pop culture. Let's see here. All right. I chose an article that describes how social interactionism has changed within American society, which was impacted by the great late actor Chadwick Boseman. He changed the social perception of cinematic films. In his movie 42, Boseman played Jackie Robinson. He displayed the realities of social interactionism during the 1940s and how he changed the game of baseball and was a pioneer for future African American athletes. Through his movies, Boseman was able to help end biasness against the African American community. Another example was his famous role as King T'Challa in the movie Black Panther. This film showcased the African American culture in just a brilliant way, in which Boseman again helped to subside unfamiliar subjective biasness regarding the culture of African Americans. He demonstrated the rich history of African American culture in America, so much so in a reverse sense. The pulp social culture of Chadwick Boseman's role of T'Challa, King T'Challa, helped to connect the symbol of Wakanda forever as a sign of strength, bravery, heroism, and honor. So now when you do see Wakanda forever, people do associate this with a positive symbol of the African American culture that honors their ethnic culture instead of being a negative association. I felt Boseman was a pioneer in Hollywood, and his work will last forever, and so much so that even almost a year past his unfortunate passing, people are so impacted by his role as King T'Challa and also Jackie Robinson. his legacy will live on. So that's an example of how social interactionism can be negative, but then also can flip to the positive and be impacting. Now, I'm going to talk about the reflected appraisal theory, which is the occurrence of an authoritative role figure such as a teacher, police officer, or parent who casts a stigma or a label on a youth. The cycle of stigmatization can often produce lasting harm to children because of the impact of their self-image, which they see as social outcasts. In a sense, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy in which the young become the label of a social expectation that asserts you are no good. The danger of a stigma, more specifically as a social outcast, can lead a child to adopt the mentality of us versus them, which can inspire more delinquent acts. Also, the reflected appraisal process is the alienation between the parent and child because of negative tags, which decreases, again, self-image and increases illicit behaviors. This is also true in schools because of a negative label attached to a person with behavioral problems or separated from class because of mental health issues whatsoever can cause where the child figures there's something wrong with me, I'm going to adopt that, and I'm going to continue with wrong behavior. To mitigate a label, we must acknowledge that the behaviors are wrong, and if they are illegal, they are illegal. However, we must be careful to not allow a child to associate their bad behavior with their identity. Because juvenile behavior, bad behavior can be changed, because mostly juveniles do grow out of their problematic behaviors and become mature adults. Okay, quickly, retrospective reading reveals the linkage of present behavior with past characteristics, such as labeling someone with actions that recompose the person's identity to fit the label. So in Edwin Lemert theory, he created the concept of primary and secondary deviance regarding labeling. In a brief sense, primary deviance regards norm violations, such as crime and delinquency, that have minimal impact on the legal actor or youth and will be forgotten real quickly because they're so used to being in a negative environment, so they do not really care about who labels them as what. So if they're in a harsh reality of, let's say, a low-income community, they're not going to care about if someone says that kid's behavior was wrong or bad or he's a delinquent. They're going to continue pursuing their behavior. It has little effect on them. In contrast, the secondary deviance is the inaction of a deviant event that draws social attention from members of society, also social control agents such as the law enforcement, who inserts a negative label. Let's, for example, a youth is being adjudicated for arson. In that case, a neighbor might say, I knew that boy was trouble because he always played with matches and firecrackers. He must be guilty for pyromaniac behavior. So that's an example of retrospective reading. Further on here, I'm going to talk about our story this week. This story entails a youth who is socially known to be a good kid, who is academically strong and dedicated through his involvement with school clubs. Usually this young person has a strong bond with law enforcement, specifically community police officers. So he's a good kid. He respects the law. He respects his authoritative figures in his life. However, suddenly he begins to walk alone. He's becoming more detached. He is not going to the school clubs, and he is accused of graffitiing local buildings and is going to be in juvenile court. I assumed the role as a community police officer who was required to testify. I will share my following observations regarding what is concerning, because his comment did say in the story that he's a loser and that he was being stupid after being paid a compliment by the community policing officer. Okay. I would suggest, if I was in juvenile court, I would advocate this youth as a stellar child who has not displayed primary deviance or previous delinquent acts. We got a good kid that's been involved in the community. And for some reason, there is a cause that's causing his recent proclivity to wanna graffiti buildings, which is not okay. That's vandalism. The recent shift in his behavior is highly concerning. It could be a sign of at-home problems. I would suggest to the court, but also for my own curiosity, I would ask these questions such as, who's sowing the seed of a negative label that has dramatically changed his self-image and behavior to commit a crime? Overall, I would suggest that youth would need to be punished, adjudicated through the juvenile justice system, because vandalism is a crime and it's not okay to destroy property even if you're being influenced by a negative label. All right. However, since he is a first-time offender, I would recommend that community service, such as cleaning up his vandalism, learning why vandalism is wrong, talking to the owner of the buildings, and then also give him a probation. Maybe I would hope that the juvenile justice judge would probably give him, let's say about a year or so, and give him on probation. Keep him plugged in with accountability. That's the problem. He is slipping away from people who care for him and want to keep him accountable on the right path. Also, I would say what would be necessary is a wellness check at his home life. Also, to check his legal guardian, where they are at. Obviously, he is not being taken care of in a way that he was, or he does not have a family involvement. Also, we would want to explore his school connections, such as his peers, because it looks like from the way that he's graffitied, and if investigation does show what kind of graffiti he's painting, it could very well be juvenile gang membership. So that will recap my week 3 discussion. Please let me know your thoughts. Engage me on our discussion forum. I'm excited to communicate with each of my classmates and with Dr. Reese. And I will see you next week. Thank you very much.